It's Philosophy Talk.
They say all people are created equal.
But are some people better than others?
Everybody talking about the seventh son in the whole round world. There is only one, and I'm the one. I'm the one. I'm the one, I'm the one. The one they call the seventh son.
All humans may be born equal, but they die with different accomplishments in their past, and they leave different legacies for the future.
Some people are better baseball players. Some people are better artists. Aren't some people just better people?
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerve herder.
Who's scruffy looking?
Should the most gifted among us be held back by the morality of ordinary folk?
Are some people better than others? Coming up on Philosophy Talk. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're broadcasting from the studios of KALW, San Francisco.
That's down the highway from Stanford University. Philosopher's Corner there is where Ken and I teach philosophy.
And today we're asking, are some people better than others?
Well, Ken, some people are certainly smarter or more artistic, stronger, more agile. Some, like me, better looking.
Oh, John, don't flatter yourself.
Okay, than others. If that's what you're asking, then the answer is obviously yes. Some people are better than others in certain respects. But if you're asking whether some people are just plain better human beings, are more worthy, more entitled than others, then I think the answer is obviously no.
Oh, really? Come on, John. Consider like all the great artists and composers, the great thinkers, the people who have discovered things and invented things. You don't think they're superior human beings?
Well, they're gifted, but I don't think that means their lives are somehow worth more than anyone else's. When Thomas Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal," he wasn't saying that we're all born with the same virtues or talents in life. That's clearly not the case. But what he meant was that our lives are of equal value, and so we should each have the same rights and responsibilities.
Equal value to whom? Equal responsibility for what? Think about it. If we have different virtues and talents, then we should be treated differently. Think about a baseball team. Some are great players, some are bench warmers. You don't give them all the same playing time. So I think Jefferson was wrong.
I don't know how to break this to you, Ken, but you sound like an elitist.
Well, to give you another example, just take Picasso. He was an adulterous blackguard who treated women very badly. But you know what? He did something that most artists couldn't do. He completely revolutionized modern art. Now, I think people like Picasso, you got to give them more resources, and you got to give them some kind of moral legroom. You got to cut them some slack and tolerate a little bad behavior from time to time.
I guess you're saying we should tolerate bad behavior from any great artist, composer, scientist, even politicians, I suppose. Basically anyone you'd put in your elite category. Their contribution is so great, it's okay if they cheat on their spouses, neglect their children, or otherwise act like selfish jerks.
Well, I don't really approve of that, but sometimes it's necessary. Faulkner said, if a writer has to rob his mother, he will not hesitate. And he also said, the ode to a Grecian urn is worth any number of old ladies. I don't fully agree with that, but I kind of agree with that.
Well, I hope your mother doesn't hear this program. You might as well quote Nathan Leopold of the infamous, I should say, child-murdering duo Leopold and Loeb, who said, "A thirst for knowledge is highly commendable no matter what extreme pain or injury it may inflict upon others." Would you agree with him, too?
No, look, you're twisting. I'm not going to go that far. First of all, they weren't great anything. They were just, they were legends in their own mind. They were entitled rich kids with delusions of grandeur. They're irrelevant.
Yeah, but they tried to justify murdering a child using the same kind of elitist rubbish you've been spouting. They thought they were Nietzschean supermen, beyond good and evil. If you think, like Faulkner, that a good poem is worth any number of old ladies, where are you going to draw the line? How about an old man like me? You're wandering into dangerous territory here.
It may be a slippery slope, but there's a clear line. Murder's clearly wrong no matter who you do it for or whatever reason. But take like Steve Jobs. He was a jerk. He was jerky to his subordinates, but that helped them all become greater. I think maybe you have to excuse bad behavior like that, but only for those who have achieved greatness, judged objectively. I'm not talking about delusions of grandeur like Leopold and Loeb. Those are different things, real greatness and delusions of greatness.
Well, maybe you have to expect bad behavior, but you don't have to excuse bad behavior because, after all, who gets to decide what's great? What if we value different kinds of achievement? Frankly, I don't give a hoot what Picasso accomplished. Being exceptionally smart or talented or able to fool the art community into think that your scrawlings are somehow special doesn't give you the right to be a jerk. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's way more complicated than you're willing to admit. First of all, I'm told greatness doesn't come easy to these folks, and they struggle with how to balance off their greatness with their personal lives. Often their personal lives are just a mess to their own sadness.
Well, on the off chance that you have a point, we sent our roving philosophical reporter, Caitlin Esch, to talk to a man known as America's rabbi. She talks to him about some great men behaving badly. She files this report.
We all know that army generals, politicians, even presidents, especially presidents, can sometimes do morally questionable things.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate.
Elliot Spitzer rose to power, taking on the rich and powerful as Attorney General of New York. But early last year, Spitzer was brought down by his involvement in a prostitution
celebrated
scandal.
Four-star General David Petraeus, once considered a possible presidential candidate.
Great men behaving badly is rather the norm. It's not the exception.
Rabbi Shmuley Boteach has counseled thousands of couples, and he's a big believer that immorality in one's personal life does not necessarily translate to immorality on the job.
Thomas Jefferson is the father of our independence, and yet he owned slaves, refused to set them free at his death. The same was true, of course, of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who saved the world from Hitler. The country adored him and elected him to 4 terms as president, yet his own wife refused to share his bed.
Rabbi Shmuley is perhaps best known as Michael Jackson's former spiritual confidant, but he's also hosted a reality TV show. He's run for Congress in New Jersey, and he's written many books. He calls himself America's rabbi.
Even truly great men, moral giants like Martin Luther King, whom I consider to have been the greatest American of the 20th century because he restored America to its founding ideals and principles. He also was not always faithful in marriage.
But we don't remember Martin Luther King as an adulterer. We remember him as a civil rights hero. Rabbi Shmuley believes all moral crimes need to be taken in context.
The Hebrew Bible is riddled with the moral failings of great men and great women because, unlike Christianity, which defines righteousness as perfection, Judaism defines righteousness as struggle. We all struggle to do the right thing, and we're not always successful. But we find greatness in that struggle, in battling our nature to always do better.
So Rabbi Shmuley is a little surprised at the public response to General David Petraeus' admitted affair with his biographer, Paula Broadwell.
The FBI uncovered hundreds, if not thousands, of emails, many of them salacious in nature.
He ran a campaign in Iraq that was brutally savage. All the while, he's going around the country talking about honor and integrity.
I really think he's overdoing it as a showman because he goes in front of Congress, he's wearing, if you noticed, the ribbons grow every year.
He makes one big mistake, and he has to take responsibility for his mistake, and he has, I think. Now we're finding nothing but fault in him. I don't get that. It's almost like we judge people by a divine standard, and when they make a mistake, we discover that the emperor has no clothes, that these are tin men all along, and then we can find no virtue in them. It's absurd.
Perhaps it's better to remember politicians and public figures aren't necessarily better than the rest of us. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Caitlin Esch.
Wow, salacious emails. You can't imagine Napoleon sending salacious emails, but that's because email wasn't invented yet. Thanks, Caitlin, for that interesting report. I'm John Perry. With me is my fellow Stanford philosopher, Ken Taylor.
And today we're asking whether some people are better than others. Now, we'd love to hear what you're thinking on this topic. We're live on the radio right here, right now. So give us a call. 1-800.
You're listening to an encore presentation of Philosophy Talk. The phone lines are closed.
Or email us at comments@philosophytalk.org. We're joined now by Thomas Hurka. He's a professor of philosophy from the University of Toronto. He's author of The Best Things in Life, A Guide to What Really Matters. Thomas, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Pleasure to be here. Hi to you guys.
Oh, we're fine. A little rainy here. Tom, you've thought a lot about what makes for a desirable life. You've written books on the subject. How'd you get interested in this topic?
Well, it probably goes back to when I was a kid. I mean, I was like any kid. I wanted to spend a lot of my time watching TV and up in Canada here playing road hockey. And my parents thought, no, the important things are, working at school and acquiring some knowledge, understanding things. I was taken to Shakespeare and the arts and to opera because I was told that was important. And I internalized that. I came to believe that was important and right, that there were some ways of spending my time that would make that were more valuable, more worthwhile than others. And I took that from my childhood, and I went into philosophy. And at that time, 1970s, not a lot of people were talking about those sorts of topics, but I wanted to think about them in a philosophical way. That's what Plato thought about it and Aristotle thought about, and I wanted to think about the lessons I'd been taught as a child in the matter of contemporary philosophy.
You gave up road hockey for philosophy, and you wanted to make sense of that big decision. Now, Ken, in our introduction, was claiming, and at least pretending to think, that some people are truly superior to others. To me, that sounds like elitism. What do you think?
Well, I think, that can be understood in different ways. And I think the answer is always yes, that some people are better than others. But can I draw some distinctions? I mean, that's what we philosophers do.
Just do them one at a time so we can jump all over you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you talk about who's a better person, we often mean who's a morally better person or who's a more virtuous person. And clearly, some people are morally better than others. I mean, Nelson Mandela's better than me, and there's lots of people in my neighborhood who are better than me. So you might mean, is one person morally better than another? And I think the answer is clearly yes.
Well, right. That's not controversial, right? I mean,
That's right.
Some people are saints, some people are sinners, some people are intermediate schmucks like me who are neither a great saint nor a terrible sinner.
That's right.
Right. So what's a second distinction?
Well, I think rather than talking about who's a better person, we should ask, do some people lead better or more desirable lives than other people? Then we're open to more than just the virtues and moral goodness. And one way in which people can lead more desirable lives is just if they're happier. If one person is more cheerful, more upbeat, and another person's gloomy and depressed, the first person's got a better life. Now, that's not what you're asking about. You're asking about a different set of goods. So if some people have more knowledge of the world or greater achievements in the arts or in athletics or in business, are their lives more desirable? I'm with Ken. I say yes, their lives are more desirable. They had a choice between developing their artistic talents and playing mediocre ball hockey. In choosing to develop their artistic talents, they made their lives more desirable.
Well,
and
their lives are more desirable, but does that mean they ought to be treated different and held to different standards?
Given more things? I mean, what follows from their lives being more desirable?
Well, let's just take the example of happiness, because that's less controversial. If you've got two friends, one of whom is very easy to make happy, and another person who's depressed, and you just have to spend hours and hours and hours to make the tiniest little improvement in his mood or state of mind, and you've got a certain amount of time to spend on either one, won't you spend your time on the one who you can successfully make happier, who you can make a bigger contribution to the desirability of his life?
You obviously haven't lived my life. I spend more of my time with my friends who are harder to make happy, are certainly more demanding and want more of my time.
Well, that's very noble of you. You're being very morally virtuous, I guess. But I mean, you want to put your effort where it'll have results. And the same thing applies, I think, if there's a Picasso who's got the great talent, no reason for him to have more money, no reason for him to have more lovers if it's not going to help with his painting. But if there are certain resources, certain things that he could have that could enable him to develop the talents that he's got and nobody else has got, I'd say absolutely.
Now, Karl Marx or somebody along those lines said, from each according to his talents, to each according to their needs, or some permutation thereof. Sounds like you disagree with that.
Well, I guess it depends on what needs are. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Depends what we mean by needs. So the question is, does Picasso have a need for what's going to enable him to paint? If you say yes, I'd say yes, then that Marxian formula is consistent with saying, we should provide the resources that the outstanding members of our society can use to make the most of their talents.
This is a challenge. I want to explore this because I actually think this has some very hard-nosed consequences, and I'm going to see if you're willing to live up to those consequences, but we'll come back to this in a bit. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today we're asking whether some people are better than others.
Are geniuses entitled to more stuff, or should everyone be held to the same moral standards?
Geniuses, jerks, and just desserts when Philosophy Talk continues.
Took me by the hand, and you know what she told me? I was great.
So you think you're the greatest, right up there with Picasso and Ringo Starr and Paul Ryan. Do you deserve special treatment, or are you just a jerk for telling us? I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor, and we're questioning whether some people are truly better than others.
Our guest is Thomas Hurka. He's the author of Best Things in Life, A Guide to What Really Matters.
So, Tom, there's a couple issues I want to dig into you, but let's go back to our roving philosophical reporter about great men behaving badly for a second. Look, it's probably difficult to walk in the shoes of somebody like General Petraeus every day, but or Bill Clinton during the Monica Lewinsky thing. But I personally am willing to cut these guys some slack. I mean, is that one of the things you think goes with, being exceptional, that you should have some kind of moral slack, or should everybody be held to the same moral standard no matter what their accomplishments?
Well, you don't want to say that it's any less of a betrayal, for example, when, a married politician cheats on his wife. But, if it's sort of an unavoidable side effect, if it's somehow tied up with the great things that he's doing, that it's not just something he did on the side that had no bearing. It either contributed to it or it was a way he had to let off steam because of the immense pressure he was under. Then I'm going to cut him some slack.
So are you with Faulkner then?
That was about, what is it?
A little ode to the Grecian urn is worth a few old ladies. I don't quite know what he meant by that, but he's, if he's not going to be nice to little old ladies, if he's not going to take the time to be nice to little old ladies in order to produce great art, then forgive him for that.
Yes. I mean, you can hear I'm hesitating because I want to say he's still treating the little old ladies very badly. But if you look at his life as a whole, and there are these great works that are produced, and somehow you couldn't have the great works without the bad treatment of the little old ladies. And that's got to be part of it. It can't be that he could have written the same novels while treating little old ladies nicely. Then if he treats little old ladies badly, he gets cut no slack. But if somehow it's part of the package, then when you look what the rest of the package contains, you say, we're not going to make such a big deal out of that.
So who wrote Ode to a Grecian Urn?
It was
Keats.
Keats.
Yeah. All right. So we got
still unravished bride of loveliness.
Okay. So we got Keats, and let's assume he's mean to little old ladies, and he writes a great poem. And then we got Joe Blow, and he's trying to write a great poem, and it doesn't have the time to be nice to little old ladies. So my question is, but Joe Blow doesn't accomplish anything that anybody remembers. Is the slack we should cut them for the moral difference? Is it what they're trying to do that's important, or what they actually accomplish that's important?
What they actually accomplish. But let's remember, it's not just that Keats happened to be on the side nasty to little old ladies. If it didn't help him writing Ode on a Grecian Urn, if it wasn't sort of part of the personality that enabled him to write Ode on a Grecian Urn, then he gets cut no slack, whatever. It's only if it's a necessary, accompaniment of the achievements.
Tom, I don't quite see the argument for that. So help me come to believe that. I'm a little bit skeptical. What does it really take to be nice to little old ladies? I mean, but I can imagine something, being a faithful spouse or something or whatever, that takes a lot of work. But help me think about why. Give me more of an argument, because I don't quite have the intuition yet.
Yeah, well, look, you've stuck me with Faulkner in this wild quote, because I'm with you. I don't see why, that you write novels in the morning, you have to run over old ladies in the afternoon. I don't see why that follows, or why if you didn't run over the old ladies, you couldn't write as well in the morning. So it's a bad example.
Give me a better example there.
Well, I think my suspicion is, I'm not a psychologist, but I think to really achieve excellence in some field, you have to be single-mindedly devoted to that field, and you have to believe in yourself. You have to take risks, to try, for example, to revolutionize modern art, as you said Picasso does. You have to have supreme self-confidence. You have to be a kind of egotist to think, yes, I can do that. I can revolutionize modern art. And that kind of egotism, I think, can lead you to be just less concerned with other people.
Well, look,
I mean, professional athletes, notoriously jerks because they're so focused on themselves and their performance. And it may be that the two just go together.
Well, I draw several conclusions from that I'm not sure are the same as yours. I mean, let's suppose that it's just, if not exactly a law of nature, a very well-established uniformity that people that have the ego to put in time at some endeavor that requires a lot of work because they think they're really good at and can accomplish something great tend to be unfaithful spouses and jerks in other ways. Suppose that's just true. Well, in the first place, I don't. That kind of thing isn't going to distinguish between the ones who are right about what they're doing and the ones who are wrong about their doing. And it seems to me a little hard to make a moral distinction on the basis of what's really kind of this ephemeral, contingent thing about the result of their endeavors. I mean, what we need to do, I mean, if we're going to encourage people to be that way, then we'll have to encourage a lot of people to be that way who really aren't going to accomplish anything because we can't tell in advance.
Well, life is full of contingency. You know that. You set out to revolutionize modern art. You might succeed, you might not. You might know in advance that the effort to try and revolutionize modern art is going to make you a nastier person. If you do revolutionize modern art, then the nastiness is, as it were, compensated for. If you don't revolutionize art, it isn't compensated for, and you're just a jerk. That's the way life is.
Well,
you can't tell in advance.
You can do lots of immoral things that turn out to have good results. It may be that by ignoring my spouse or my children, I managed to save Stanford $1 million, and that goes to really worthwhile students. That doesn't make what I did right. It doesn't mean society should cut me that slack. It's like you say, it's just a contingency. So I feel the same way about Picasso. A jerk's a jerk, and if contrary to my belief, his art turns out to be doing the world a lot of good, well, that's just a different matter.
Look, let me just give you a very banal example, not to do with superior people. Familiar moral philosophy example. You promise to meet somebody for lunch. You're driving to the restaurant, and you see there's a car accident, and you stop and you help the people, and you don't make your lunch appointment. Everybody thinks you did the right thing. I mean, you broke a promise, but the moral obligation to keep the promise is outweighed in this case by the good you could do to the people who are in the accident. And so similarly, if what was it? A little bit of money for Stanford students. I'm not so excited about that. I'm more excited by the revolutionizing of modern art. If you've got an obligation to the people around you, but by breaking that obligation, you can revolutionize modern art. That looks to me like the case where you break the lunch date to save the accident victims. Something that's wrong in itself, other things equal, is justified because of the benefits on the other side.
Let me go to our email. We've got an interesting point from Greg Slater. I put it in my own words. It's, we've got all these politicians claiming that if we don't give tax breaks to really rich people, they'll keep their money and not create jobs. But a lot of people like Warren Buffett say that's bull. If you don't give tax breaks to really rich people, they'll behave just as they would otherwise. Is it a little bit like that with these great artists, that they've got us flim-flammed into believing that if they don't break the rules, we won't get all these great works, athletes that if they can't be unfaithful, they won't get the hits? But is that really true? Do we really have any empirical reason to believe that artists won't be just as creative if they're held to the same standards as others? That's from Greg Slater, one of our regulars.
That's for you.
For me?
Yeah.
Well, look, it's as we say in
try to wrap that up in a word or two, will you?
Well, it's an empirical question. I'm insisting that, it's not as if because you're a great artist, you get to do anything regardless of the effect on your art. It's only if, not being a moral paragon in your dealings with other people is somehow contributes to your art or is a necessary side effect of the dedication that you have to give your art, only then is it justified or compensated. How often is that the case? I look at the artists the world has seen and the professional athletes. A lot of them look like jerks. You know.
Tom, I want to ask you.
Come on, Barry Bonds. You guys are in San Francisco.
Yeah, I know. Tom, I want to ask you about another kind of thing that's a consequence, seems to me, of what you said. So I got a bunch of money to spend. I got some resource to spend. And I could spread it around, or I could dole it out unequally. It seems to me that you're suggesting that I should dole it out to those who will make the best use of it, not by some principle of fairness. It's like playing time on a baseball team. You know, social respect, social resources should be doled out like playing time on the baseball team. Dole it out to the people who, by using it, will make the use of it and improve the whole team and all that sort of stuff. What do you think? Am I right to see that consequence in what you're saying?
Well, that's one consequence. You know, I'm not suggesting that the only way resources should be divided up in a modern society is, you know, give it all to the Picassos and the Barry Bondses. I mean, there's many other considerations. You know, there's considerations of needs. You know, at the beginning, there was some talk about all men are created equal, but you know, we don't object when there are better parking places for people with disabilities. Now we're putting more resources into people with disabilities because they've got greater needs.
Right. Okay, but take care of the basic needs. Take care of the basic needs. And now we're going to go beyond basic needs. Everybody should have their basic needs satisfied. But am I allowed to give more to the more talented, to the brighter, because they'll make better use of it?
Well, I think we already do it, don't we? We have government programs.
I'm asking whether we should, though.
Yeah. I'm trying to persuade you that we should by the fact that we already do it and nobody's making a fuss about it. I mean, we have more in other countries than the United States, but there's government support for the arts. So there's funding for artists to create art. And that's partly so that people who can appreciate their art have an opportunity to do so, but they have to have the ability to appreciate art. That's widely accepted. I think that's an effort on the part of the community to promote activities that are intrinsically valuable by the people who have the capacity to participate in them. Yes.
I want to ask you and Ken a question about something I'm fairly ignorant of. But one of the great modern ethicists of our time, John Rawls, has these two principles. First, a kind of egalitarian principle. Everybody should get the same. And then an exception to that, except if they're getting more, will be to the benefit of the least advantaged in the community. So I want to ask kind of two questions. What did Rawls think about applying that in the kind of cases Tom is talking about? And what does Tom think about Rawls' difference principle in those two principles?
Okay, well, Rawls changed his mind. So in A Theory of Justice, he said you can't, it's unjust, it's against the principles of justice to spend government money on the arts or on university research, my Stanford professor friends.
Oh, my goodness.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, that's in the section 50 on the principle of perfection. And he might have got some grief from his Harvard colleagues about the university research part. So in the later book, Political Liberalism, he backs off and says, well, you can't write into the Constitution, but if the legislature is in favor, it's okay. But, you know, so the idea has been picked up from Rawls and generalized that the state has to be neutral about the good. It can't promote university research or artistic activity because on the grounds that those are just intrinsically valuable human activities. I just don't buy that for a minute. I think Rawls's arguments against that perfectionist principle, as it's called, are very weak. And I think they're very much not in harmony with the considered judgments of people in most modern societies.
Tom, I want to try something on you. Let's see how far you're willing to go with this. Because Nietzsche, not one of my favorite philosophers, but one of my favorite philosophical rhetoricians, because I don't know how systematic he is. I love systematic philosophers. But anyway, he seems to think at some times that the lesser natures should regard themselves as kind of instruments of the higher nature. They should not demand kind of equal treatment and all that, because they should be into the perfection of society and all that stuff too. And so they should regard themselves as instruments of that perfection. And so they should endorse, the higher nature as getting more and getting held to a different standard. Would you go that far?
No. I brought my Nietzsche with me. Do you want me to read you the quotes?
Yeah. Am I getting Nietzsche wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. Mankind must work continually at the production of individual great men. That and nothing else is the task. How can your life, the individual life, receive the highest value, the deepest significance? Only by your living for the good of the rarest and most valuable exemplars. Now, that's the opposite of Rawls, because Rawls thinks that society should be arranged to sort of maximize the benefit to the representative worst-off individual.
Right.
And Nietzsche thinks, no, society should be organized to maximize the benefit to the best-off individual. It's the exact opposite. I absolutely do not go that far. To go back to, all men are created equal, I think everybody's life has equal value, and a fixed improvement in anybody's life has equal value. It's just that if some people can make greater improvements, we should prefer making the greater improvements where the greater improvements can be made.
But
Nietzsche prefers.
Go back to my baseball analogy, though, Tom, and tell me why it's not right. Why you don't want to go as far as Nietzsche. A baseball team. They're all trying to win. They're trying to win together, and they should all want to win. And they shouldn't demand playing time independently of whether the playing time helps the team win. You should want the stars. You should want the starters to have most of the playing time. You should want the role players to accept their role as role players. If playing time is the resource that improves people, it should go to those who will get the most benefit and then deliver the most benefit.
But if I may just interject a comment there, given the analogy, what's the team? Mankind? Oh, come on. I mean, a team sport is one thing, but you live your life in society. Why should I care about whether the Picasso next door has a little more resources to come up with his art than anyone else? No, so you just have to adjudicate between us, Tom. Very simple.
Yeah. Well, look, it's not what you're suggesting is not Nietzsche, what I'm suggesting is not Nietzsche, because Nietzsche thinks that a tiny improvement in the quality of Picasso's life is worth huge, much larger sacrifices in the lives of people who are less excellent. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. That's the opposite of Rawls. I'm just saying, equal improvements count equally, but some people can make bigger improvements than others. As I said, I don't find the baseball team analogy so helpful because there's an external goal, which is winning. Here, we just want to make the lives that are lived in our society as fully human and desirable and complete as they can be.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about morality and superiority with Thomas Hurka, author of The Best Things in Life, a guide to what really matters.
Is there any place for elitism in an egalitarian society? Do some people deserve more than the rest of us?
The few, the proud, the elite. When Philosophy Talk continues.
Someone's got to be the best. But what does that mean in a democracy that's based on equality? I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Today we're asking, are some people better than others? Our guest is Thomas Hurka from the University of Toronto. And we've got Anne-Marie from Berkeley on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Anne-Marie.
Hi, thank you. I guess I was thinking originally of somebody like Jean Genet or a Moliere even, but, people who report to us an underworld or an otherworld life, even somebody like Jim Carroll, right, who wrote the Basketball Diaries, or, and then even going to someone like Mickey Rourke, who had to live a pretty low-down life in order to become the better actor later in his life. Does that justify their reportage? Does that justify the lives that they lived?
Well, that's a question for you, Tom, I think. Thanks for the question, Anne-Marie.
Sure.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Well, those are good examples. Let's say Mickey Rourke goes through a period of suffering, and at the end of it comes out a better actor. I'd say that the suffering was redeemed, if you want to use that word, by the fact that it led to something more valuable later.
What about
that's the line I've been taking.
What about the suffering he put other people who were in his life through? Is their suffering redeemed by his becoming a better actor? I know you don't want to separate yourself from Nietzsche, but here Nietzsche would, I think, say he's entitled to inflict that suffering on those other people in order for him to become the better actor, because in some ways they're just his instrument. He should never regard themselves as conditioned by the other. Would you go as far as Nietzsche there?
Well, the principle is outweighing. So, there's bad behavior towards those other people. They're hurt, and that's other things equal wrong. It's no less wrong, other things equal, than if it's done by somebody else. But if the result is something really significant, then it can be outweighed. Pain is a bad thing, but if as a result of pain you come through to some great achievement later, the pain is redeemed in a way. It's outweighed. It's justified.
Okay.
It's not out.
So, Tom,
it's the same thing.
I'm going to try and challenge you again. I know you want to resist the challenge, so I'm not trying to be nasty. I'm just trying to get the challenge fully resisted. So Mickey O'Rourke's screwed spouse, during the time in which he was being bad guy and making himself a great actor, I guess. I thought he was always an overrated. Yeah, she's complaining against him. She says, "You such a blah, blah, blah." What is he supposed to say to her to get morally excused by her?
Well, again, how great an actor was Mickey Rourke, I don't know.
Let's imagine he was the greatest. He was the greatest. Let's imagine.
Well, if he really was the greatest, then it's still, a violation of her rights, but it can be justified in the long run by what it made possible. In the same way that breaking a promise to make lunch can be justified if you're saving accident victims.
Well,
same thing basically.
Yeah. Well, I have to think about whether it's the same thing basically, but suppose I were to say, well, instead of justify, how about compensated? Sometimes something is wrong, but the fact that the evil you did is compensated for the good it allowed you to do. Now, I don't know if that would apply to the case where you see an accident and stop and help someone, but I'm not sure that's directly analogous. But it seems to me in the Mickey Rourke case, as we're imagining it to be, you might say, well, it wasn't right for him to cheat on his spouse and make her life miserable. But given that he did that, he compensated by drawing on the resources to become a great actor. But I wouldn't say it justified him. How about that distinction?
Wait, just let me. You guys are talking about justified as if it's justified to the universe. I'm wondering, justified to the other. How does Mickey Rourke justify to her his behavior toward her? Because she's the one who has. I can imagine some impartial jury saying, "We forgive you," but what about her?
Probably alimony.
Yeah.
Well, John mentioned compensation. Let me just add something. When you violate an obligation to somebody else, even when you're justified in doing so, you should still feel badly about having done it, and you should compensate the person to whom you owed the obligation. So let's say Mickey Rourke becomes a great actor. He's got to apologize to his wife. He's got to compensate to her. Assuming that she's left him. He's got to make it up to her in whatever way he can. But if he does, and he really did become a great actor, well, I'd say this is a case in which something that was other things equal wrong has been outweighed. And maybe it's not outweighed unless he does that compensating and making up as far as he can. But I'm not going to say that he's got to give up his acting career if remaining faithful to his wife would stop him from developing his talents. And this is, again, assuming, which contrary to fact, that he became a super actor.
Well, we don't, yeah. Aesthetic judgments, Ringo Starr, Picasso, Mickey Rourke, these are hard to make. We have an interesting email from S. Jensen, who says, history is littered with great people who were not recognized by their contemporaries. Who gets to decide worth? You got anything to say about that?
Well, I think if you ask who gets to decide, we're assuming that there is something called worth, and we might be bad at recognizing it. Mm-hmm. And so there might be people who were great who were never recognized, and people who've got huge reputations who didn't deserve it. Now, if they've got a huge reputation and they didn't deserve it, their bad behavior wasn't justified. If they did produce great art, let's say, and they weren't recognized and they behaved badly, it is justified. You often can't know what's right. I mean, the idea is that it just always we have to always be able to know easily what the right thing is. Just not true.
So, Tom,
it's hard to know.
Tom, just to
but objectively,
just to follow up on Jensen's question, kind of generalize it. It's one thing that it's difficult to know who the really gifted people within an activity or an endeavor are, but how about the worth of endeavor itself? When you were a young kid in Canada, you became convinced that road hockey was a less worthy pursuit than opera or philosophy. I mean, maybe I don't have that quite right, but something like that. Some people think that, baseball, it's worth really grooming people who can be really good at baseball because it's such a beautiful sport. Mm-hmm. But they don't feel that way about beach volleyball, where others think that a beach volleyball is obviously more worthy of society's investment than baseball. How about ping pong? How about video games? How about excellence at video games? Should society be investing in the people that show real ability at being good at Worlds of Warfare or whatever it's called? Who gets to make these decisions? Are they objective? Are they a reflection of reality? Or is it mostly a matter of public relations and money?
Well, there's certainly a lot of public relations and money. But look, the same thing is true of any moral question. Take distributive justice. I mean, what's a just distribution of wealth and income in the United States today? A lot of disagreement about that. You mentioned Paul Ryan on one side. There's going to be people on the political left on the other side who've got very different views about that.
Well, there's people on the political left, the political center, and a large part of the right that disagree with Paul Ryan on that.
I want to take you guys.
Well, but it's just look. You could always say about any moral question, who's to decide? Because it's always it's always difficult to know. But I don't think any of us. Well, I think most of us don't believe that just because it's difficult to decide, there is no truth of the matter. And I'm just saying that it is justified if what results is actually objectively worthy, however hard it is for us to know what that is.
I want to take you guys. Tom, I know you don't want me to get you into the Nietzschean corner. I know that, and I'm not trying to do that, but I do want to emphasize something. You're still a very modernist kind of guy. In modernity, I don't know quite when it happened. The idea of equality, political equality, liberty, all that stuff arose back in the old days. Aristotle, Plato, they thought there were some people who were fit to rule, some people were fit to be ruled. Nietzsche seems to be one of the great modernist people who believe something like that. And I'm going to go back to this team analogy. If society's like a team, right, and we have a collective enterprise, and it's not started in some state of nature, but it's kind of given to us. I mean, is the Aristotelian, Platonic, Nietzschean idea that some people are fit to rule and some people fit to be ruled, and they should each recognize that, is that really so crazy?
I thought you were going to ask me whether Mickey Rourke should get extra votes for president.
No.
Because he's an artist.
I'm thinking of the organization of a political life around non-egalitarian principles, around principles of perfectionism, those with the superior souls, those with the superior talent. One of the things Plato hated about democracy is that it treated everybody equally, as if all opinions mattered the same.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't think, that anybody should have more votes than anybody else. I think that there are people who would be better as political leaders than others, and I hope that the voters can recognize who the better and more able political leaders are than others. I don't think there are people who are naturally rulers and naturally ruled. And I'd be very suspicious of the idea that extra talent and ability in the arts or in philosophy. Have you listened to philosophers talk about politics?
Yeah.
Is a qualification for ruling. That's what Plato thought. The philosophers should rule. I've spent time with philosophers. That's the worst idea of all.
I'm just trying to stress that you have one foot in the ancient world, because the ancients believed in, let's call it perfectionism, kind of like you. But you have another foot in the modern world, because you're kind of trying to marry the constraints of perfectionism with the constraints of equality. That's kind of how I hear you. Is that correct or not?
Yeah,
correct?
that's fair, but I don't think it's so anti-modern. Because remember, I just used the example, do we spend government money on supporting the arts? And it's typically the higher arts. Well, most modern societies do, and they always have. Now, that's a perfectionist strand in present-day politics.
Right. You don't believe that's justifiable by a Rawlsian principle of difference? I mean, that spending money on the arts and on the elites who pursue the arts and consume the arts and produce the arts somehow makes the less well-off among us better? You don't accept that as the justification of that?
Well, Rawlsians try that, but I mean, it's a stretch, isn't it? Rich guys in New York going to the opera is going to make, people in the ghetto better off. I think it's a stretch.
So why should I then, if I'm the guy in the ghetto, why should I support a scheme that supports? So talk to me, the lesser off guy. Why should I support this scheme?
Well, I kind of walked into that one, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Hopefully, anyone can see that some lives are more desirable than others, some activities are more desirable than others, and they are worth supporting. Now, we're not spending billions and billions of dollars on the arts. It's a relatively small strand in government spending, but it's perfectionist, and it's vehemently opposed by the Rawls of a theory of justice on principled grounds. And I'm not opposed to it. And the American public, just to take your country, has not been vehemently opposed to it over the last 30 or 40 years.
Well, I don't know. You haven't been following all the political debates over the endowment for the arts. But you know what? On that note, I'm going to thank you for joining us. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Our guest has been Thomas Hurka. He's a professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto. He's author of The Best Things in Life, a guide to what really matters. So, John, has your thinking about what really matters changed?
Oh, it was a good conversation. Dostoevsky and the brothers Karamazov said that only those who suffer the wrongdoings of others are entitled to forgive. We had a really interesting email we didn't have time to get to from Emma, who doesn't forgive her husband for putting her and her son on welfare and ruining her career in order to advance his own. So I wish we'd had time to get to that.
Yeah, I wish we'd had time to get to that, too, because I find Thomas's views fascinating. I just wonder how you justify them to the people who are the victims of your maltreatment, or to the lesser off who don't get the benefits of these subsidies for the arts. He was about to tell us that, but he
has a very nuanced view on a complicated topic.
Yeah, and this nuanced view on this complicated topic, you can find out more about it. We've already started a blog. We'll continue more blogs. So the conversation continues on our blog, theblog.philosophytalk.org, where our motto is, get this, cogito ergo blogo. I think, therefore I blog. You can also find out more by following our tweets on Twitter and by visiting our very active Facebook page.
Now come to think of it, there's one area where we do know someone who's better than others. At High Speed Talking, nobody's better than Ian Scholes, our 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes. If we don't know who or what we are, we would be in a much better position to set up a totally equal system of justice. So claimed John Rawls, using the thought experiment premise he called a veil of ignorance, behind which we are all equal. But where do we go from there? Well, we each have basic rights to what Rawls calls primary goods, things which a rational man wants, whatever else he wants. That's the stuff like rights, shelter, food, make your own list. This leads to what is called the difference principle. As I understand it, the difference principle means that after the primary goods are acquired or distributed or whatever, somebody shouldn't have something if it makes somebody else worse off who doesn't have that thing. This quickly becomes problematic. What are those things? The right to clean air, a high-resolution television, chocolate milk. Take clown shoes, for example. Great for clowns, but does the lack of clown shoes affect a lot of, say, trial lawyers, bus drivers, or cosmetic surgeons? And now there's a new wrinkle. Colin Farrelly, in an article called The Genetic Difference Principle, written in 2004 for the American Journal of Bioethics, wrote, quote, what should be equalized? Should we try to equalize our genetic potentials for health, height, being physically attractive, etc.? Suppose, for example, we could maximize the genetic endowments of the least advantaged in the next generation by legislating mandatory genetic screening of fetuses, and, where necessary, compulsory use of prenatal genetic therapies, unquote. Well, here's a fine kettle of fish. Reading this, my mind started to reel. Where does it stop? Antidepressants, for example. Why should the rich have them and the poor not? It's much more depressing to be poor than rich, believe me. In the future, as genetic knowledge gets more sophisticated and we can either cure people with diseases or prevent the diseases in the first place, who gets the treatment? And what about enhancements? If we can use drugs or gene therapies to make ourselves smarter, stronger, happier, who gets them? Who doesn't? Who pays for it all? Should we just say the hell with it, have the veil of ignorance surgically removed, and try to live together in a Hobbesian, dog-eat-dog libertarian hell? I don't know. Whatever happens, though, let me keep my clown shoes. Please, I gotta go.
The wisdom of the ages, in a nutshell, from Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University. Copyright 2012.
Our executive producer is David Demarest.
The program is produced by Devin Strolovich. The director of research is Laura McGuire.
Thanks also to Chris Hoff, Merle Kessler, Dave Millar, Jimmy Tobin, Corey Goldman, and Mark Stone.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from the Templeton Foundation and from various groups at Stanford University, the Friends of Philosophy Talk,
and the members of KALW San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
Not even when they're true and reasonable. The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org.
I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
Oh, so now you think you're better than me?
You think you're better than him?
Look, let me just state for the record, I think you're both better than me.
Okay.